Otep, welcome. I hope everybody's doing okay. It's good to have you all a part of today's broadcast. Today, we are looking at World Soil Day 2020, Keeping Soil Alive, Protect Soil Biodiversity. World Soil Day 2020 and this campaign, Keep Soil Alive, Protect Soil Biodiversity, aims to raise awareness of the importance of maintaining healthy ecosystems and human well-being by addressing the growing challenges in soil management, fighting soil biodiversity loss, increasing soil awareness, and encouraging governments, organizations, communities, and individuals around the world to commit to proactively improving soil health. World Soil Day is held annually on the 5th of December. As I shared, it means to focus attention on the importance of healthy soil and to advocate for sustainable management of soil resources for a food secure future. The date, December 5th, for World Soil Day was chosen because it corresponds with the official birthday of H.M. King Bhumibol Adulyadej, the King of Thailand, who officially sanctioned the event. Today, I'm excited to have two individuals from the Arboretum here to be a part of today's discussion. Dr. Patrick Bohlen is the director of the Arboretum and professor of biology here at UCF. He is an ecologist with a diverse background that includes research in agricultural, forest, and wetland ecosystems, with a current focus on urban ecology. He oversees an innovative student development program that aims to cultivate the next generation of leaders who will help the environment thrive. And we also have Jen Elliott, who completed both her BS and master's degree at UCF with a focus on marine turtle biology, ecology, and conservation. In 2009, she was hired as a field biologist at the UCF Arboretum, where she is now program director overseeing the Arboretum and the Natural Resources Program. In this position, she is responsible for research and educational initiatives, experience based on living, learning, fostering an inclusive environment that includes or supports human connections with ecosystems and landscapes, and developing sustainable urban environments. Jen is an instructor in the biology department, where she teaches a class focused on designing and implementing relevant ecosystems-based research and science communication. So if you all would please just welcome my guests today. I'm excited to have you both. And just want to check in real quick. How you doing? How's everything? How you been dealing with life, especially with this pandemic happening around the world?
I think things have been going pretty well. We've, because at the Arboretum, have a mostly outdoor operation and a relatively small staff, even though we haven't been able to afford ourselves of the hundreds of volunteers who contribute thousands of volunteer hours. We do have a core staff that hasn't been able to keep our core program going. And because we're kind of an essential operation, our students have actually been able to stay active in the fall, both summer and fall, and have really accomplished a lot given the circumstances that we're operating under.
Nice, nice. And so, so in a sense, what is the missing link between UCF faculty, staff, and students, administrators, and the Arboretum? I mean, those of us who have not necessarily taken the opportunity to go and be a part of what you all have to offer, what are we missing?
Well, you're not really, because if you're on campus, anywhere on campus outside a building, you are really in a space that has been influenced by the Arboretum. Insofar as director of landscape and natural resources in the Arboretum for 10 years here, a lot of what we accomplished in creating the outdoor environment in all the spaces on campus has had some influence from the Arboretum. Some of our most cherished spaces like Memory Mall,
Nice.
the wonderful boxes on Memory Mall where the students hang their hammocks, the Cypress Dome at the center of campus that has the boardwalk through it. A lot of people don't realize everything that goes on behind the scenes to make those things happen. And the Arboretum does influence that to some degree. We're in the process of asking the administration to designate the entire campus as the Arboretum. Many
Oh, wow.
universities have done that, and we think there's a lot of efficiencies and synergies we can pick up by doing that. So I would say everybody has been. However, some of the key elements of our program, like the main park area that we have developed over by our trailer, where we have our office, where Jen is right now, and our natural lands that are really quite incredible and open to the public and available. A lot of that has to do with people coming to work every day to do their thing and leave, and maybe not realizing all the things we have to offer here. And so
Right.
we've tried to do more, and we're trying to do better to get that word out to people.
Yeah, so we passed by it when we were on Gemini, and I go by it all the time, and then, think about, okay, I should get out one of these times and go and take a walk. And, I'm not necessarily the nature guy. So
Yeah.
I think about that, and I was like, well, what would I be seeing when I go through there? But I think it's really an asset to have on our campus. And I'm glad you just said that, it's all over. It's all around us. I didn't even think about that walkway between the Student Union and the Memory Mall and things like that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Jen, how are you? What's going on with you?
We're doing great, actually. I was saying before we started how proud I am of our students for the hard work that they've put in over the summer. We were very worried about how we were going to, keep our operations running, and our leadership staff really stepped up to do that. And so in the fall, we were able to operate really, aside from the fact that we're all wearing masks and we're at much reduced numbers, our fall semester was very similar to what a regular fall semester would have been in the work that we accomplished. The fact that our leadership team were able to hire interns, they designed projects just like they would any other semester. We were able to execute some of those projects, and we worked very closely with some outside organizations to get a pond planting done that we had wanted to do in the spring. So we're doing really well over here, and I'm quite proud of the hard work that they've put in. I also wanted to say that another way that we engage, because you said you're not much of a nature person, but we work very closely with student health services and groups like wellness and health promotional services, just to really talk about the benefits of getting out and walking, right? So trying to get people out there, whether it's on our campus, because that's a little bit easier if you just want to take a walk in the afternoon, or out into our natural lands. Right. And we work very hard with the natural resources team to get kiosks out in the natural lands and maps and ways that you can use your app to navigate out there on your phone. So really trying to make that stuff more accessible so that people like you who may not know aren't necessarily apprehensive about going out there, and about the biology and the wonderful ecosystems that we have right here on campus.
Right, and that's the thing, right? So we always have these things around us that we don't take advantage of, right? And so I grew up in Connecticut, and so the nature and the people would be like, "Oh, you had such a great fall, right? And did you see all the great colors?" And I'm like, no, I saw them changing, but I didn't give much thought to
that's right.
The fact that it was happening, right? And so we just take for granted some of the things that are happening in our lives. And so when I drive by and see your trailer and all those other things, I always think to myself, I got to get out there one day and go and actually travel and walk and see what's there, right? And so again, that tidbit of information that we just got just now, that it's all around, didn't even think about that. And so that just even increases now my curiosity as to what else I'm missing when I'm on campus. So.
Yeah, and the other thing that the 7-acre area around the Arboretum had kind of been abandoned for quite a few years because the university was kind of in a holding pattern. We do have a master plan for that area because that's really kind of the spark or core area for us. It's where we do a lot of our engagement. We have a greenhouse over there. In there, in the big grassy area, we've created a mulch trail. So if you do go over there, I can walk down this trail. We'll take you places. There's a boardwalk that goes through the woods over there. The students are always painting something on the railing through there. It's really kind of peaceful, and it's a very short little. It's not like going for a giant hike if you went out to our natural lands. That is a good way to take in kind of what's going on there next. We are trying to create more. It's a place to engage with garden, nature, plants, get a respite. Jen always kind of likens it to, Central Park. It's a place where you can go and kind of be on nature, but still be inside the Gemini Loop. It's the last remaining place. So that 7-acre area is still the core area that is worth engaging with. The community gardens there. The community gardens are a fantastic facility down there. The students produce the food and grow the garden down there. And we have other teams working on different things like pollinator gardens. We have a team that works on urban horticulture and little projects and the things that they oversee. These are program areas that are overseen by students through our Learning by Leading program. They are there. You could see them just by walking around by yourself at any time. So that is a good place to kind of come see what we're doing over at the Arb.
So is there anything I'm sorry, go ahead, Jen.
No, I was just gonna say, I also think that it's a place that's sort of rich in history. UCF is a very young institution, but Dr. Hank Whittier, who was the original founder of the Arboretum, sort of squatted. We always tease, he squatted on the east side of campus and turned this 7-acre parcel into the beginnings of the Arboretum. And our students have done a really good job of honoring him in that space, not just as we think about how we develop this space as New York City's Central Park. It was funny you talked about being from Connecticut. That I sort of started pushing that idea to Dr. Bohlen after I came back from a trip to New York City, and I fell in love with Central Park. And I thought I was just so enamored by the fact that you could be in this giant city, this crazy space, and still have this beautiful green space where people can commune and come together and share ideas and the music and the art and all of those things. And I said to him, this is the last green space on the inner circle. We really should start to envision it in a way that we can create that sense of community here at UCF, a place where people can go and feel like they're a part of something and welcome and appreciate nature and get that break from the bustle of our busy lives here, at UCF. We really are a little city in ourselves.
Jen, I can just tell you right now, I just love your energy.
Thank you.
And it's making me excited now. It's like, you know what? I gotta go see what she's singing. I gotta go be a part of that.
Come and visit us.
Definitely that. So the theme for World Soil Day is keep soil alive, protect soil biodiversity. What are your thoughts on that, and how are we at UCF kind of being a part of that, or being, I guess maybe honoring Soil Day?
That's a good topic. We haven't really honored World Soil Day. You actually brought it to our attention, so kudos to you for doing that. I do have a little bit of a background in soil ecology, like 20 years. So, which I was kind of my former life before I came to UCF. I haven't done as much. I haven't been as active in that field. It is kind of exciting. You said, Jen's enthusiasm and all that. It's one thing about soil is it's so fundamental and important to the human situation, the human condition, the human future, and it's just not that sexy.
I disagree. I disagree.
And I know Jen's going to disagree, and I should, because I spent 20 years.
My wife would disagree too. My wife is from Dominica, and that's the I forgot what they have a moniker. I think it's it's like the environment. It's like, I don't know. I'm saying it wrong now, but anyway, they really are like full of trees and nature.
It is the foundation.
Yeah.
It is absolutely the foundation of everything.
Yeah. So, and it is such an important thing. And I think that what a lot of people don't realize is, we all realize that everything we eat, comes from the soil. More and more people are trying to get, quote unquote, back to nature, where they want to get their hands dirty. They want to have a little garden. They want to interact. And soils are just so fundamental to so many things relating to climate change, water quality, the human future, food production, and ecosystems. Every ecosystem is characterized by its soils. You showed that map at the beginning where you have your intro, all the maps of the world. If you did all the soils of the world, you'd see just as much diversity. And so much of the characteristic of a human place is, what the soil is like. Yeah. And it has a history, it has a function, so many good functions. And it is kind of ignored. I guess that's what I was saying. It wasn't sexy, but and diversity, most of the diversity in most ecosystems is in the soil. That's a lot of people don't realize. And less than 1% of it has even been identified in terms of like the bacteria and the fungi that are associated with things like plant roots and growth. So, our program, that's just a key thing and so important to humanity. Our program intersects a lot in different ways with that. We don't directly have a soil component, except, really we kind of do in our urban garden, our community garden. We focus a lot on soil fertility. You can't just grow vegetables forever without adding soil amendments and understanding soil pests and crop rotation and things like that. So our students learn a little bit there. And in fact, they got very excited when I told them a little bit about soil. They're like, could he come back and talk more about soil?
Yeah.
They always think he's a genius, but after he went into this just little casual conversation with them in the garden one day, they wanted to set up workshops with him.
I already do. Like,
Soil.
like I was thinking just now about, get the kids over there and have them kind of playing around in the soil. That whole garden experience is something that's phenomenal.
And then another aspect is our urban horticulture team. Urban soils are a very interesting thing. And all of our landscapes, every plant we plant, and you really kind of have to consider what are the soil conditions.
Right.
A lot of the things we either fight, or a lot of the things that work well work because we have to take into consideration that urban soils are not like regular soils. They have construction debris, and we use different kinds of irrigation and things like that. So soils are kind of important to that. And then our natural lands, as you may know, we have quite an extensive natural lands, and we have a kind of innovative land management program where we use prescribed fire. And so many of those ecosystems, I think we have like 12 or 13 different ecosystems on campus, and a lot of them are characterized by having a different soil, mostly based on how wet it is. In Florida, we have inches of topography, so
Right.
That kind of drives that, which is very interesting.
So that's really interesting. So people be like soil or think dirt, right? It's just dirt, right? And so when you think about it, you're saying that there's various kinds. There's a myriad of different types of soil.
Yeah.
And, for me, what I've always learned about is when I think about, I guess, Florida, was that you either have soil, which was brought in, or sand, right?
Right.
So, what's the difference between the two? And why do we that we're a state that's built upon sand as opposed to maybe, I guess sand is a sort of soil.
It's funny you should ask that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny that he asks that.
Because I was thinking a little bit about that, just because it is the World Soil Day. What the heck are we going to say about soil? And there's a very famous soil scientist from Berkeley called Hans Jenny, and he developed the whole concept of soil formation and how it forms. And when he did, that was like in the 1940s. And that really changed how people looked at ecosystems. And because we finally understood that every ecosystem has its characteristic soil, which is as much enmeshed in it as the vegetation and the animals and the plants. And so I was thinking about that, and I got this report from a place I was an intern back in the 80s, the Land Report. There's a place called the Land Institute. They sent us this little report. So last night I came home and I opened it up, and there they have an interview from the 1990s. Hans Jenny's dead. They had an interview with him, transcribed, which is interesting. And then they had a picture. I don't know why this place is in Kansas. They had a picture of the Florida state soil. We actually are one of the states in America that has a state soil. And this is the Mayaca fine sand, which is sand. You can see the sand here. It's very sandy. You can see it's kind of grayer up here. And look at all this black material down here. And that basically is all of the black nutrients and organic matter that over the tens of thousands of years have leached out of the sand and been deposited down here. Okay. You would never think walking on these gray sands up here, there's this huge amount of soil organic matter and carbon stored underneath the ground. And that's kind of typical of the flatwood soils. Now, we don't have this on campus, but we have similar types of soils. So this whole idea that there's different soils, that has to do with the vertical gradient of the soil, and then also what makes it up. And in Florida, very often it's almost 100% sand, but there's going to be some silt and clay in there somewhere. There's the three aspects to it. And then there's the living aspect of the soil and all the things that live there.
That's pretty neat. So, so when we think about it, so I think about my house, right? And I'm at home, and my wife is gardening. My mother-in-law lives with us, and she has a garden out there. And I can imagine that the stuff that they're planting, like we can go to Home Depot or to a plant store of some nature. Lucas Nursery is near us. We go there often. Should there be certain types of soil that we should pay more attention to for certain crops? Because like if I want to plant fruits per se, or if I'm planting vegetables, how do I pay attention to making sure that I got the right kind of soil, especially since there's such a diversity of soil here, and possibly like you just showed us in that picture, sand that I'm going to dig down into. How do I determine, the best type of soil to use? If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
yeah. Well, for vegetables and things like that, if it's or a flower garden, very often you have to add amendments to produce the food. And as I stated earlier, in an urban area, very often the soil you've inherited is stuff they brought in, topsoil from somewhere. And then really it's just a matter of making sure that the moisture content is right. The pH is important because some of the natural soils of Florida would be acidic. If you want to grow blueberries, for example, you have to have very acid soil. I can guarantee you, if you just plant them in your backyard, they're probably going to die. So there are special requirements of certain plants. And then some are more generalists, and they can take a wide variety of conditions. And very often some of the native plants, native species, can sometimes perform well seasonally because they're adapted to the climate and soils of Florida. So I wish there was an easy answer, but it does kind of depend on your context of your home and that kind of a thing.
And so I get that. So like I put like a layer of soil down, or 3 or 4 layers of soil down. Eventually, maybe as the plants are growing, their roots are going to go down into where the soil is no longer there. How does that affect plant life, or does it?
Oh, they would go down. I mean, plant roots, depending on the plant, it could root 2, 3, 4 feet deep. The roots go. They might be abundant in the layer that's rich that you've added, but they will, depending on the type of plant,
And it won't hurt the plant when it goes into a different type of soil?
No, it's only going to go where it wants to go.
I was going to say, they'll move to find what they want. So if it's not deep enough, they'll start to go out. They'll start to send the roots really into the substrate that they want.
And if we're talking about shrubs or trees, you can imagine there's as much carbon below ground, there's as much mass below ground in that plant as there is above ground.
That's right.
That way.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it sounds like, and you have the same opinion that that the root system on a plant is only going down or only able to go so far. That is absolutely not. That's why you see oak trees starting to break sidewalks.
Yes.
Right? Like they'll go wherever they want to go. Often that's because they're trying to find a water source. Oh, wow. So those roots will go out, and I mean, like Dr. Bohlen said, the people don't realize the amount of mass that's in the root system. They see the plant and they think that that's the biggest part of the plant, but the root systems on especially some of those oak trees are just incredible.
So then it's not necessarily a green thumb that people have, it's the fact that the plant is smart enough to go to where it needs to go.
It's about right plant, right place. So like, I think that's what Dr. Bohlen was trying to get to. Like, it really depends on what you're growing.
Okay.
Different plants want different soil types and different water regimens. And so the trick to being a successful gardener is understanding the plant that you're trying to grow and giving it the things that it needs. Sort of like mentoring students.
Yeah,
exactly.
Put them in the right spot. Yeah,
exactly. Putting the right, or being a leader, taking your team and putting the right people in the right places,
So you said the right type of water, you said the right type of soil, things along those lines. I think about my yard, and we have a sprinkler system in our yard, and the water that comes out sometimes I wouldn't want to drink. I don't know where it's coming from. How do you ensure that you don't, like when you have something like that, I think there's iron in that water and there's other stuff that, I know it makes my sidewalk rust and things along those lines. So how do you compensate for that water to make sure that your garden or your plants are going to thrive?
It really does depend on your water needs. Like if you got a vegetable garden in Florida, you got to water it unless it's very rainy in the summertime, but summer's not the best time to grow a vegetable garden. I'm kind of a low water. I mean, I only turn my water on when my grass is about to die, because I try to have a landscape that's pretty self-sustaining. I have some things, wetter areas where I have plants that like wetter conditions.
That's right.
And I have drier conditions. If you've got iron in your water, it sounds like you're probably on a well, because most of the water that would come from the plant wouldn't have as much iron in it. And then we have a lot of reclaimed water. Here on campus, we have 100% reclaimed water, and I also have that at home. where the water coming out has actually been through a sewage treatment plant. So it does have a little bit of an odor to it. And it can affect things like pH and whatnot, but, watering only when necessary, I've always, said is really the best thing. Because in Florida, we have a wet and dry season. If you water too much in the winter, you're encouraging plants that, don't really thrive well in this kind of climate, which is to do better with less water in the wintertime. And in part, the plants compensate for that. But you do have to think about irrigation.
I was gonna say your plants will tell you, I mean, if
Okay.
they'll tell you.
There's an interesting low impact development. University of Florida has Pierce Jones runs that program. He's just was dying to get some developments to actually put in yards with no irrigation, where they only use water to establish the plants and then have no irrigation. That's kind of his end goal, just from a water conservation standpoint. So water, about 60% of our water in Central Florida is to irrigate landscapes.
Oh, wow.
And residential consumption is huge. And so we really do need to think about why we're doing that in an area that gets 52 inches of rain a year.
Wow. You got me thinking now. So I got all these questions in my head about all this. Well, I think about it. So I had, so watering does have a lot of difference. It makes a lot of difference in the soil or the grass. Like when I see mushrooms growing up, I had a person who comes to take care of like some of the sand, I don't know, they take care of our grounds and says that mushrooms aren't necessarily a bad thing. I don't know that to be true. I'm wondering from your perspective, what's your thoughts when somebody's land is starting to get mushrooms and or weeds in different areas that are growing up?
Well, weeds sometimes fall under the purview of the HOA, where if you're in a homeowners association, they have rules about weeds and weeds that you can have. Fungi, I'm certainly not a fungal expert, but most of the fungi in soil are harmless and or beneficial. Most of the plants that grow in Florida, the natural native ones like the pines and oaks and natural lands, they're dependent on certain types of fungi called mycorrhizal fungi that they actually need to acquire the nutrients that they get. That they actually give nutrients to the plant, and the plant gives them carbon as energy. It's kind of an exchange, a mutual exchange. And a lot of times, some of those mushrooms you see in your yard are those type of mushrooms. It's the fruiting body. So they finally fruit. Or it's a mushroom or fungus that's involved in breaking down the organic matter in the soil, which we call like a saprophytic fungus. They also, the mushroom's the fruiting body. It means they're producing fruit.
Okay, so you should leave them alone, or you should pick them out like most people pick them out?
You can knock them over or knock them down, or just, they don't last long. They tend to open up, drop their spores, and it's just a way that they reproduce. If it's unsightly, you can knock them down. They're not hurting anything. Most of the bad soil fungus, you don't even see the fruiting body. You see like the dead grass. and there's certain characteristics that those are the fibers, the mycelium in the soil. The mushroom is the fruiting body, and generally they would be harmless, although maybe to some people kind of unsightly.
Yeah. So how did you get started in wanting to be a soil what's the title that you call yourself?
Well, I was kind of in soil ecology. I had a straight biology background, and I became interested in agriculture, and was always interested in animals. So as I became interested in agriculture, I realized that there was a connection between agriculture and needing to understand soils. And once you understand soils, then you realize, oh my gosh, there's all this biodiversity in soils. Maybe I could look at biology in soils. And that's how I ended up getting into that. And there's a couple programs around the nation. I applied for my PhD to those kind of programs. So I did work in that area, which is a good foundation. I've gone on and done a lot of different things, but it does give me that. I always kind of like having that little strength in soils, especially as I've gotten into the horticulture and land management. It is good to have some foundational understanding of soils and the animals and organisms that live there.
Wow. And so I would think that every person that you've ever lived or dealt with, you learn about how to best kind of cultivate the land that you're living on. You talked about what's happening in your home in terms of how you keep places wet or dry and things along those lines. Is that something that you think about when like if you were to move tomorrow, say, would the land that you move to or the home that you move to have just as much value of your search as the house or not? That makes sense?
Yeah, and then maybe Jen can speak to that too. But yeah, once you know this much about nature, it's hard to look at anything the same way.
Yeah, that's
So,
exactly what I was
I
gonna say.
mean, it's people talk about plant blindness because we're talking about
Yep.
soils. It's easy to be blind to soils because it's underground.
Right.
But most people drive by a landscape or walk through a landscape. They're seeing a tenth or hundredth as much as someone who's attuned in a naturalist way because we see a lot going on. And if we see the plants, we're also seeing the soils and the topography and the water moving. And so that's just kind of a natural thing when you have, the training in the fields that we have. And Jen, you can speak to that. You just kind of see that part of the world in maybe greater detail than most other people do.
Okay.
I think that happens a lot for us, especially when we're doing tours in the natural lands, so we'll be talking to people and oftentimes people will say, oh, there's nothing to see in Florida. Everything is green, there's no, there are a lot of times there are people from up north and, and I say to them, that is absolutely untrue. Come into this with me, let's go out there because I can show you there's incredible biodiversity out there, but in Florida, it's very subtle, right? A lot of the flowers that are really important and the pollinators that interact with those flowers that are all dependent on the topography and the soil and the water and all of that are very subtle and very small. But once you start to see them, you see them everywhere. You see that stuff everywhere. And that's one of the greatest things that I oftentimes get from the students, watching them start to get away from this idea of plant blindness. That's a thing that we talk about with them a lot. And I think Dr. Bohlen's absolutely right. When you start to see landscapes the way we see landscapes and you can share that with other people, it's just incredible to watch them start to see it,
Right. And so when I think about the garden that we have in our backyard, and I heard you talk about crop rotation and when people are doing big farming and things along those lines, they utilize crops in a certain area and then they move to another area and stuff like that. Should a garden in your home have that same kind of philosophy?
Absolutely, it has to.
So it's not just big agriculture, it's our community garden. In fact, our students learned a lesson this year because you shouldn't follow certain plants with other plants just because they carry the same kind of, let's say, pathogenic organisms like root rot and things like that. So the Solanaceae would include things like peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, not sweet potatoes, but regular potatoes. Those are all in the same family. You don't want to follow Solanaceae with Solanaceae if you're just trying to do a little organic garden because the pests they'll carry over to the next crop. Oh. And so we actually have in our community garden, we have beds and we have farmed areas. We actually have a garden planter that we make sure every season we shift over, we rotate to try to minimize that problem.
Oh, okay.
And Dr. Bohlen, you want to talk a little bit too about, nitrogen fixation, about the three sisters?
Yeah, some plants bring nitrogen into the soil. This year, our students did a little project where they grew kind of a traditional Native American three sisters grouping where the Native Americans, the Iroquois, would plant corn, and then they would plant pole beans that would climb the corn, and the pole beans would grow on the corn, but then they provided nitrogen because they're nitrogen fixers. And then they have squash that covers the ground, so it blocks out all the weeds. So you can have these plants interacting, and some of them can actually rejuvenate the soil. The legumes, things like beans and peas, because the microorganisms that live in their roots actually take nitrogen from the air and bring it into the soil, which is really the only way we had nitrogen in the soil before we had fertilizers. So those are all things that you can take advantage of too by shifting crops and then taking advantage of some of the nutrients that other crops brought in.
So you bring up a very interesting thing when you brought in Native Americans just now, and the fact that they were doing that naturally without, degrees and biodiversity and things along those lines. What lessons have we learned from early settlers who kind of used this land? Or were they doing it and it just happened by happenstance, and now we have this knowledge base that we can utilize to kind of figure it out, or were they just that intelligent in terms of how to deal with that land?
In my opinion, I think they probably knew. They knew what worked and what didn't. They may not have understood the way we do now, nitrogen fixation, and because now we have fancy tools so that we can look at things on very small levels, but they absolutely understood that growing with what you had was, I mean, that was the way they had to do it, you know, seasonality of crops and nutrient needs, companion planting, understanding what things grew well together that gave them the best crop, crop yield at the end. And I mean, we learned a lot about from them too with fire. You know, a lot of the Native Americans used fire as well. So I think we tried to learn to keep those things going, which was one of the reasons we encouraged the students to follow that Three Sisters planting, because that allowed them to do that sort of research into the history of agriculture, and allows us to share those types of stories with the people who come to visit the garden.
Nice.
I do think there are, a lot of opportunities, and there's some global efforts to try to make sure we don't lose indigenous knowledge when it comes to agriculture, particularly when it comes to the great variety and diversity of different crops. There's a tremendous wealth of genetic diversity. So we're not only eroding, our soils, which are degrading worldwide, in some places worse than others, obviously, but we're also degrading and eroding the genetic wealth of agroecosystems only because we're losing some of these original varieties and some of the natural practices that enabled soil fertility to be maintained over time. One of the challenges with industrial agriculture is, trying to produce a lot out of the ground with a lot of chemicals and fertilizer and fossil fuel inputs and that kind of a thing without degrading the soil, and then figuring out a way of maintaining the diversity and productivity beyond the time at which we're going to be able to put that much into our systems.
Yeah. So when we think about the wetlands and we think about like down south, we have like the, I don't know if it would be marshes or, the rainforest.
Everglades.
And all those other types of things that are going on. The Everglades, thanks. I was trying to find the right word. And so are we in a sense ruining or harming the state of Florida with all our growth and the things that we're doing in terms of the soil and all that? I don't want to open up a can of worms.
Well, there are a lot of issues. I think Florida is pretty well. I will say this, and it's a little heartbreaking to say. I would say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, Florida was probably recognized as one of the leading states in the nation for conservation, and it still is. But unfortunately, some of the decisions that have been made over the past 20 years have reversed what was at the time a very kind of, for lack of a better word, bipartisan approach to growth management as well as conservation. But Florida still, based on the amount of land we've conserved almost 30%. And that's a goal of some international conservation organizations, is to conserve 30% of the world for nature. Right. Florida's almost there in terms of how much land we've saved. Development is still a big issue. And particularly in these suburban wild urban interfaces where we are here at UCF, there's a lot of biodiversity we could preserve with the existing lands that we have. And development is currently and will create some challenges as far as preserving that. Road development, sea level rise, all those different issues will put some strains on conservation. But I would say Florida is in many ways ahead of other states in terms of how our agriculture community interacts with the environmental community. They don't always agree, but there's a lot of state effort in that area. In terms of our preservation of land, even if we can't always manage it the best way, we do preserve it and set it aside. And then I think the big thing that we need to get a hold of is develop in a way that makes the places we develop, A, more livable, and B, takes advantage of everything we know about, how you create livable human spaces and how nature fits into that.
Yeah.
You made me think of something. When I first moved here, there was a couple of instances where there were these sinkholes that were building up or growing, or I don't know what you call it. They were depleting or something in certain areas. Is that also something that's tied to how we treat the land?
Not so much. Florida is susceptible to those. I don't think I would move over west of Orlando because I don't want my house to slump. But it kind of does depend on where you are. There's areas that are riskier. And there is some evidence that at times when they've withdrawn a lot of water, during some freezes, they've drawn a lot of water to protect crops, that there were some that did cause some slumping, because there are areas, there's underground caverns in the limestone here. And a lot of our wetlands were formed in those little slumps, and they can still happen. I'm not a real, I don't know a lot about it, but Florida is susceptible to that.
Okay.
And I think that gets back to those, what we were talking about earlier, those teeny tiny changes in elevation that happen in the state of Florida that cause tremendous biodiversity changes, right? You can have a change in elevation of a couple of inches and have two completely different ecosystems. So
Nice.
those are all shifts in that lime rock. Florida we used to be under the ocean, and so all of those little shifts in lime rock are what give us the incredible biodiversity that we have in this state. And I think that people just don't realize how unique and interesting those systems really are.
Right. So how do we, as people who are not in the sciences like you are, protect or take care of the land that we're living on?
I think that a huge one thing that's very easy, I think, attainable for people is thinking about water consumption, because I think that's a huge issue that we have in the state of Florida, and just starting to understand and appreciate and connect with both our natural lands and our urban settings, and trying to think through how can we make like Patrick said, how can we live here and live the way that we want to live, but not crush biodiversity and crush natural lands? How can we live together and respect each other?
I think if you're a homeowner, there's a lot you can do. We talked about cutting back on water use, using the right plants in the right place. And also, there's a real movement in Florida, and we're trying to work through this. It's very difficult because of the industries that are involved and the multiple players, but, moving more towards the use of native plants, because native plants are better at supporting native animals than if you grow a shrub from Asia. It's less likely to support the same insect life, the same abundance of birds than if you plant a native plant, because they've evolved over time to the chemistry of the plant and all those kinds of things. So there's a move to try to use more native plants, and then just get engaged. There's a lot of issues at the county level, community, your local county commission is making decisions every day.
Right.
Orange County just voted for what I would say are one of the most progressive voting things that they did on the environment, where they actually voted to give waterways and wetlands legal protection, that any person could file suit to protect them if they thought they were harmed, which is basically it's called rights of nature. The idea has been around since the 70s, but not that many communities have done it. Now, whether that holds or whether the state legislature will get involved with it, that means 86% of the people in Orange County voted for that. That means there's clearly a lot of social interest in protecting nature in Florida, probably nationally, really, but certainly in this area, we've proven that people want our natural areas to be protected. And then going out and enjoying that, even if you're not a real outdoors person, trying to find a way to maybe connect to that and learn about it and why it's important, and understanding how your region is different from other regions and what makes it unique. Right. And being in the southeastern coastal plain, we do have a tremendous amount of biodiversity, and it's also a threat of development. So we're globally important in that regard. And what we do and how we do it has a big influence on an example to the world of whether it can be done, living in conjunction with nature in a way that supports all these multiple goals.
So how is that tied or not tied to maybe the concept of global warming?
Global warming, I think, well, for Florida, the big issue with global warming is sea level rise, which will probably cause some migration of people. Orlando is actually, in one projection, the Central Florida region is expected to get 400,000 migrants, internal migrants in the nation, moving inland to get away from the coast because of the coastal flooding issues. So I think for Florida in particular, we're kind of unique. Our issue is not so much temperature, it is sea level rise. And then this issue of whether storms will be worse and more frequent with hurricanes, but also just regular rainfall being more severe, maybe more extended droughts. I think Florida is a better situation relative to temperature because we're already hot and it's not predicted to get that much hotter, but sea level rise and that sort of a thing. And then also as the climate changes, very often, because we have this very unique plants and animals in Florida, it could be some of them are going to get pushed to the limits because some of them are already rare and threatened. They depend on certain kind of habitats, and as the climate changes, it may push those habitats around, and that does pose some threat to the survival of those. But those things are interrelated.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. I want to go back to the Arboretum and that nature trail and the things that you have there, and ask specifically, what would I see today that I won't see or in like May, and what do I need to look forward to seeing in May, so that I understand, because again, you're telling me that there's these changes that go on there. So what can be expected now and maybe 6 months from now?
So the best time to be in our natural lands, I shouldn't say the best time, because I think it's always a good time to be out there. Well, except the middle of the summer, because it's really hot at that time. But the fall is really when we have the best wildflower bloom. So in October, really all of October is when it's the most beautiful out there. The Asteraceae, which is the aster family, is in full flower out there. The purples and the yellows, and I mean that's a time where you don't really have to know all that much to go out there and be like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
I think throughout the other seasons, like I said, the summer is really hot. The only people you find out there in the summer are, the diehards. Looking for some of those interesting wetland plants. The grass is really...
Yeah, and the wildflowers are really more out in the natural lands, and that in the 7-acre area. Wintertime you have some more leaves off the trees. It's more open that way. A few things are kind of turning brown and shedding a little bit. Not as much as flowering, but we still have quite a bit of activity out there because our community garden goes through the winter, unlike up north where you have to shut it down. Winter is our growing season. So if you were to go to our community garden right now, you'd see some plants that are still growing actively and being harvested and eaten. And we'll redo some in January and February, obviously. And then if you walk down through the trails on the boardwalk, the boardwalk at different times of year, sometimes there's things flowering in the summertime in there. We have some gardens that we've planted at the entrance to that. And those flower at different times of year. Some things are green now that would be covered in flowers. Right now, the ground orchids are blooming
I was just
tremendously.
going to say the ground orchids
Absolutely
are incredible
beautiful.
right now.
And they've just been blooming for 2 months, so I don't know if they're ever going to stop.
I
The
know, they're
bamboo,
gorgeous.
looks pretty much the same year round. So you see a lot of the same things in that 7-acre area, but there will be some different things flowering, maybe more wildlife at different times of year and that kind of a thing.
So definitely having an appreciation for beauty and what beauty looks like, because I think everybody takes it in differently, but there are so many things that are happening there that are beneficial to kind of just lay your eyes on, so to speak.
And I think another, I was just going to add that in the summertime is really when we have, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. B, but the best pollinators, right? That's when the pollinators are really the most active.
And the fall.
And that's when you see like the butterflies and the sweat bees. We have this green, really beautiful metallic green sweat bee. I don't know if you follow our social media, but Dr. B, we call him Dr. B, like a honeybee, because, well, he's our bee guy. But he takes beautiful pictures of bumblebees and wasps. He really knows much more about the insect biodiversity out there than I do. But
that's why I started. So I'll be honest with you. So the reason why I don't like nature so much is because I hate bugs. And
we got to get you past that.
And stuff like that.
The bugs are wonderful.
Okay, I have to.
Some are wonderful, yeah.
Huh?
I don't like fire ants, pretty much.
No, none of us like fire ants.
So when people go and they utilize it because I believe that it should be a sacred place in some regards when they go there. What shouldn't people do when they go? I mean, like picking plants and doing all those other things. When they go and they see the beauty, what should they do and what shouldn't they do to keep the Arboretum at its normal, I guess, rate of being or beauty?
Well, I would say just enjoy the space quietly and as peacefully as you can. Don't make noise that for other people, because it is kind of a quiet, contemplative spot. So we wouldn't want people coming and blaring there. their music, but if they want to put up a hammock and sit among the trees, obviously not picking things or plants, or if you want to or interested, contact us and maybe we can accommodate.
Are there
something like
signs that say do not pick or do not do things?
No, there aren't signs like that. There's a few interpretive signs that we have there, but there aren't signs like that. And there's not that, people might want to go down and pick our ground orchids and pot them up.
They're beautiful.
And we do grow some plants in our community garden specifically for cut flowers. So to make arrangements and things like that.
Okay.
We also have done in the past sorry.
People take those?
No, I could see them doing that, but they're not supposed to.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, and really for the community garden, you're better off getting a guided tour because it's got a gate and it's but people are welcome to walk around and look at things in there.
Okay.
During the sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I did want to say that sometimes we do workshops, so that's a good way to get engaged with us as well. We do, of course, we haven't been over the last year because of COVID, but we do, where our students put on a lot of great workshops, like plant pressing workshops, where they'll take students out into the natural lands and talk about the flowers that are out there and teach them how to press them. And then our students make jewelry. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, wow.
Pressed flowers that they
Embedded
collect
in
in the
glass,
natural
yeah.
lands. Yeah, and they turn it into jewelry.
Our students are very creative.
And, medicinal botany workshops, we do things about fire cider and tinctures. And so that's a great way to get involved with us.
You have a store? You have an Arboretum store that people can purchase?
We don't. We'd like to someday. We have a beautiful calendar coming up. One of our students painted watercolors of the native pollinator plants with a few paintings of little butterflies and stuff, but it's made a beautiful calendar. So we will sell stuff like that. We sell our honey, and then once a year in June from our honeybees. And then this semester, our students, and we always had kind of some plant sales that we did here and there, but one of our previous students really targeted like, well, what do students want to buy? They don't want to buy a shrub. They want to buy a little plant they can put on the shelf in their dorm.
Yeah.
And he started this plant sale. We had, I don't know how many this semester, maybe bi-weekly. They made $6,000, our students, in selling those plants. The first one we had, the one in October, students were lined up from the greenhouse all the way back to our trailer, which was like 150 feet. We had them socially spaced and they had masks and all that.
Right.
So, those are the kind of things with our new Learning by Leading program. And that's the other thing I guess I really want to talk about, because that's where our student, we implemented that last year. It is a student leadership development program. And basically we've created a situation where our paid co-coordinators that we called COCOs, they are working 10 hours a week in teams on different areas like the pollinator gardens, the community garden, the greenhouse, urban horticulture. We now have ambassadors. We have a social media and film team. And these are students, the co-coordinators, they then hire the interns.
Nice.
They advertise, they interview, they hire for each semester. And then that group, that team, the co-coordinators and interns, they drive that part of the program. And when we have volunteers, of course, they'd also be managing volunteers, which we're still doing to a more limited aspect. So a lot of the real exciting things happening at the Arboretum are currently happening are what those student-led teams are doing and also how they are developing as people. And it is a very diverse group. We'd like to make it even more diverse. One of the things we've been talking about, diversity and soil and biology, and which is great. But the fact is these fields, which are very important and very interesting and kind of fun to work in, they're not very well represented. Minorities and Hispanics, Blacks, it's a very low percentage in these fields. And there's a reasons for that. People have done research on that. And so one of the things we're also doing is trying to pursue some funding and get some programs in place. We do have a very diverse group of kids, but we'd like to recruit people into these fields. There was just an article in this, you might have seen it to the UCF feed, the USA Today, that, a diverse workforce in STEM is going to help us economically, and it's going to help strengthen our fields. And the fact is some of these STEM fields, including ecology, biology, and in the fields we've been talking about, we need to get more students from diverse backgrounds into these areas.
Are there programs with high schools and elementary schools and middle schools? Are there any types of programs that you're all having with these schools to kind of pique interest? We
don't. I can see eventually moving towards that. Well, Jen's I'm gonna let Jen tell about the high school one. We don't. We do. Yeah, yes, we do. We don't have the K through 12.
No, we don't have K through 12.
Jen started a high school one she can tell you about.
So I went through the what is it? The leadership program that UCF has.
LEP. The
LEP, yes.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
went through LEP, and my project was, so I teach this, like you said in the beginning, urban ecological field studies. And so the idea was, in order to start to bring these students in younger and younger, essentially taking that semester-long class and turning it into a week-long high school camp, I guess. I don't really like to use the word
Institute.
yeah, institute. So we call it the biology
Institute.
and we recruit juniors, rising juniors and seniors interested in natural resource management and conservation. And we put on this week-long institute with the idea to try to engage them a little bit earlier, because I was finding that a lot of the students that I was interacting with were going into the field of biology because they wanted to be doctors, right? They thought that the only reason you get a degree in biology is because you want to be a doctor.
Right.
So I just wanted them to understand that there are all of these different careers and all these different things that you can do with a degree in biology. And like Patrick said, we do all of this really cool, fun stuff, and you can make a career out of this. And
Right.
so many young people, especially from underrepresented groups, just don't know that that's an option.
Right. It's such a lack of information that's there. And like, the fact that you said you're in marine biology, and I think I said you're working with sea turtles, or is that true?
I studied sea turtles as both an undergraduate and a master's student here at UCF.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to get the opportunity when I finished my master's degree. They were just looking for a biologist, and because here at the Arboretum, because through a restoration plan, and I was, because I had volunteered with the Arboretum because I was just interested and I enjoyed the natural lands. Somebody gave me an opportunity, they gave me a chance. They said, "You're a bright young biologist, do you want a job? You're graduating. Do you have a job?" I said, "No." They said, "Do you want one?" I said, "Yes, but I don't know much about these systems, and they said, "That's okay, you'll learn, And I think
look at you today, and look at that, right?
Exactly. And that really is what inspires me to bring young people into this and just give them the chance to understand what we do and that they can make a career out of this.
Nice. So I think you just brought up something that's beautiful. And I think there's so many misconceptions as to what these different careers or different opportunities bring to the table. And you both just highlighted and shined on why people should think about biology, and there's different ways that you can kind of deal with doing that. A person who comes in who wants to become a doctor and doing biology to take doctor, then they find out when they get to a surgical rotation that they don't like blood or something like that, they can still use their degree to do something that may not have been what their vision was at first, but what you kind of morphed into because you opened yourself up to the opportunities that are available. Wow, that's exciting. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really, really excited about what you all have shared with me today, because it's just, you filled my knowledge with something that I had not necessarily thought of before in regards to that. And so
we appreciate that.
And you can also let me know you guys have a bee colony.
Yep, that's Dr. B.
I'm the beekeeper, yeah.
Wow. I always wonder about you all, and make sure you guys got the white suit on. And
got your suit on. That's right.
Yeah, to make sure you don't get stung. See, that's why I don't go out in nature, because you all have the suit and I don't.
That's right.
I'll tell you, I wear a lot of natural oils, and so I stay kind of far away from the honeybees, because anytime I get too close to them, they all start coming to me. They're like, "What is this interesting flower here?" So I don't get too close to Dr. B's bees. I keep my
excellent. Well, I can't tell you all how happy I am that you all were part of today's podcast. I learned so much, and I really appreciate you taking the time out today, and actually just opening up a whole new way of looking at the environment, looking at soil, looking at all of it. You say I brought World Soil Day to you, but I think you brought to this podcast just how it spawns out to so many different things, and I just can't thank you enough for the time you've given us today.
Thank you.
Well, we thank
And
you
soil
for,
is sexy.
yeah, it is. sexy.
Soil
We
is
do- we-
sexy.
Yeah, we do, and we thank you for thinking of us and including us. We're really happy to participate today. And if you or any one of your guests wants to learn more, you can explore our website or, come and see us. We'd love to take you around.
So you said you're on Twitter and
On Twitter, our Instagram is strong, and Facebook. We get a lot of our information out that way. We have about 3,000 followers, so it's a pretty good following. And
Excellent.
now that we have a social media team, it's even stronger.
nice.
We have
Well,
a
I want us to
YouTube
stay
channel as
connected.
well.
We got to find a way to get ODI. I love it, especially coming from talking about diversity in a whole different light. And
Yes.
so we have to stay connected. And
We would
so
love to do
we'll
that.
have to kind of make our roots join together.
Yes.
We will do that.
Yes.
That
Look at
sounds
me, I'm
good.
growing. I'm growing.
That's it.
growing,
You're
yeah.
doing it. Look at you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you all. And thank you all for tuning in today. I want to thank our sponsor, University Foundation Office. And so thank you all. And we'll see you all next time. Okay.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
All
Take
right.
care.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
So much.